When it comes to running a great sandbox campaign, I find for myself that preparation is absolutely critical to really help sort of create a compelling and deep world for my players to immerse themselves in and explore. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the first steps on how I go about building my sandbox campaigns, and that is sort of outlining what I want my sandbox to be. And I'm going to walk you through an outline on my latest sandbox that I've been working on. Hi, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall, and my hope for you in this video today is that you can find that it's really simple to create these outlines and get started on designing your sandbox campaign. In a recent video, I talked about how I do my initial sandbox design work, really setting the stage for what's to come and running a sandbox. I talked about how I try to identify the different themes, setting elements, conflict, secrets, and mysteries that are all happening within the campaign. And that really sort of helps give me a foundation on how I can make my future design decisions. For example, if I'm designing a dungeon, maybe I want to include one of the different secrets or mysteries I've outlined in my document. That sort of helps guide my design decisions and kind of act as this North Star reference document that I can refer to as I continue to build out my world. So without further ado, let's hop over to the computer where I'll walk you through my outlining process and show you an example of my latest sandbox that I've been designing and really sort of help you see that it's very simple to design and do the prep work for your own sandbox campaign and get you started off on that right foot. Hey everybody, welcome over to the computer. I'm going to be walking through a campaign outline that I've been working on for my latest sandbox game. You can see it here. I've just set it up in a simple Google Word doc. I think a Word doc is probably, from a technology standpoint, about the simplest as you can get. It's pretty easy and intuitive. Everyone knows it. Of course, you could just do this in a pen and paper notebook as well. That works totally fine. I actually, for my campaign management, use an app known as Notion. I find it's really great. You can have these different pages and databases to kind of store the different elements. I really like the organization of that. If you'd like to hear more about Notion, leave a comment down below. Maybe we can make some videos on how I use that system for managing my games. But for now, we'll just be looking at a Word doc because I think that is pretty simple for everyone to follow. It's very concrete and easy to understand. First up, we just have a table of contents, very simple. That helps me navigate through the document quickly. If I want to find something as I pull it up, I can just hop over to that. Super simple. And here we have the four main elements that I kind of talked about in my previous video. So we have themes, setting, conflict, secrets, and mysteries. So we're going to go ahead and dive into those. Okay, first up we have themes in the outline. So themes are really the high-level concepts and ideas that you want to explore within your sandbox. For me, I think you can have as many themes as you'd like. In this case, I really kind of highlighted three that are important to me in this sandbox. I've kind of labeled what they are, and then I've listed out some bullet points on what they kind of mean to me and sort of help guide me in when I make my decisions. You can really flesh out these bullet points if you want, but if you're really going in depth, I'd recommend just making a new document to describe these different sections rather than really cluttering the outline. I think the purpose of the outline is to kind of be brief and succinct. So it helps refresh your memory on specific ideas that you might want to take a look at. But if you really want to go deeper onto it, maybe make a new document and then you can reference that as well when you're sort of learning or looking into it a bit more. So for me in this example, I had three themes that I really wanted to talk about. The first is sort of this mythos or mythic theme, really having a past kind of world that's sort of steeped in this sort of legend and supernatural, really kind of leaning into the gods and these old kind of demigod-like creatures of power, and they had sort of this great schism and kind of rebellion of the god's servants that left the land sort of shattered and isolated. A little bit cliche, a little bit similar to maybe like a Ragnarok type event or something like that, but really let me kind of set up a small sandbox and have it the defined region. And on top of that, you have sort of these beings of power that lived there once, but have kind of retreated from the land and created their own sort of demiplanes or domains when the schism occurred. And that allows for these kind of different planes of existence that the players can explore through these kind of strange and mythic like roads or portals. Additionally to the mythic vibes, I really kind of leaned into the sort of spiritual significance and the mysteries of the natural world. So the cosmos and kind of the natural elements, the earth, play a big part in the populace's kind of everyday life. The power structures that are involved there really kind of lean into these kind of elements and this sort of religious aspect of the area. Cyclical nature is the next one. I really was interested in kind of exploring the ideas of sort of the rise and fall of kingdoms or peoples, religions. There's really kind of this repeating nature to history. If you look at human history, where you have kind of this sort of rise to prominence and then maybe a slow decay or steep decline, and then you kind of enter into this low period or dark age, only for some other new people or new group of power to kind of rise out of that. As a result of that, in this sandbox, I was really interested in incorporating the phoenix, which is a really major symbol of kind of that rebirth. And lastly, we've talked a lot about it, but really exploring the idea of religion as an instrument of power. So every different group that kind of rises to power seems to do so through religion. And it's very important to the setting that I was kind of devising. The gods are very real, but they operate kind of through indirect means, sort of through omens and portents and these different oracles and heralds that kind of interpret their meanings. Kind of really looking at how does religion become the sort of instrument of control and power was one theme that I really wanted to explore within the sandbox. Next up, we have the setting aspect of our outline. So this encompasses a lot. So your geography, your kingdoms, regions, ancestries or races, factions, all that good stuff. I just listed out in subsections within the setting overhead. Again, as you really flesh these out, I would just develop new Word documents to go in deeper on these different elements that you want to explore. If you want to talk about the Kingdom of Keyport, I would just make a whole new document really going into the details. Of course, you can add sub bullets here as you work through it if there's something really important that you want in your outline. But the outline is just to sort of remind you of these different elements that you might want to incorporate within the sandbox as you're kind of doing your planning and sketch. So I start with geography. So I wanted my world to really be kind of a subpolar, kind of cold temperate environment. I really like mountains and forests and sort of alpine lakes and rivers and kind of leaning into that. I look at real world analogs. So for me, I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from South America's Patagonia region, Iceland, the Norwegian fjords, the Scottish Highlands, New Zealand, and some national parks here in America that kind of lend themselves to sort of sulfurous hot springs and prismatic hot springs, things like that. So really leaning into kind of that geothermal activity, fire and ice. I'm operating on a hex map, so I list out the size of my hex map, just listing out the kingdom and states there, the ones that are important in the region. Could be cities or could be kingdoms or smaller states, whatever you want. Go ahead and list those out. I list out the starting regions, so where they're starting, that's important. I like to list out the races or ancestries that I'm using or focusing on in the sandbox. So I'm keeping a classic for this one. I just primarily human-centric and with some dwarves and elves also as playable ancestries. I'm running this one in old school essentials or basic expert, so that really leans into primarily humans, and then you have dwarves and elves as well. And then I list out some non-playable important humanoids in the region. Then I go into my major and minor factions that are going to play a key role, so that I can reference these quickly as I'm making different design choices. Maybe I want to include one or more of these different factions as I'm building a dungeon or building out a location. Maybe it's a contested location between these different factions, and I can kind of look at the conflicts in the next section to see what might fit appropriately there. So for me, my major factions, I have the Church of St. Gerald, which is sort of the now popular and predominant organized religion in the region, as I kind of harken back to those themes, really using religion as a means of power and control. The cult of the geomancers. So the geomancers were the rulers of the area prior to the church and the new kind of smaller kingdom states, if you will. They were sort of a blending of divine and arcane power that they kind of use to really make a lot of great wonders. They have largely been defeated or driven out. But of course, there's a cult that is trying to learn their secrets and or maybe revive or find some of the geomancers that perhaps survived the war. The Children of the Ashes is a sort of religious rebels or heretics, so they kind of come into play in opposition to the established church, causing problems for them. I think it's a good idea to have a high level history. Lore dumps and creating massive histories can be a little bit of a waste of time. Don't want to write out all this intricate detail and then, never use it or never have your players see it. I think just have some bullet points on how your history has gone. So that way, when you're making ruins or dungeons, you can maybe see how they slot into the history of the region. And maybe that can give you some idea on what might be incorporated within that dungeon or location. Of course, you can flesh out the history as you go. But again, just be careful on how much history you're making. And then list out maybe your gods or immortals, or if you have archfey or elemental lords or demon lords or whatever, if you want to list those out so you have them here, that's great. Gives you some quick reference on those. So conflict is absolutely critical to running a good sandbox. You need to have conflicts going on so your players can start to pull on threads or light different fuses that are going to set off huge powder kegs or stacks of dynamite. And you do that by having conflict happening within the sandbox so the players can get involved in it. Of course, conflict will directly happen with the players as they make their own choices and actions, but there should be things going on around them and really kind of give that sort of living aspect and dynamic aspect to your sandbox. So for me, I just keep it simple. Conflict, I have a table. I list out the high level conflict that's happening and then the factions that are on each side. If you want to go deeper into that, I would just write up information in the faction write-ups, or write up information, just create a new document about the conflict specifically and add more information there, and you can reference that. But for this, high-level table works great. You could also use maybe like relationship web or like a flow chart to kind of see the different conflicts or the different factions and the different conflicts between them. That could work too. If you're more of a kind of visual thinker, a visual learner, that might help you see your conflicts and the different factions, all the ones that they're involved in. For me, I just have the different conflicts listed out and then the factions on each side. I don't list it as good or evil. I like to leave them a little bit more gray. The players can side with who they want. If they want to side with one as opposed to the other, that's totally up to them. I don't want to make any assumptions about which side they're going to choose. So I just list side one and side two. Of course, you could have more than two sides. You could have 3 or 4 sides if you wanted. But in this case, I just wanted to keep it simple. So they're listed out here. So I just have things like heretical rebels, which are the Children of Ashes. They're opposed to the church. The established religion makes sense. The rebirth of the geomancers. So this is really that cult trying to learn new mysteries, find these different texts and knowledge of the past that the church has really tried to destroy and burn and get rid of because they saw the kind of evils and what it became as it kind of corrupted and decayed society around it. So the church is very much against that, whereas arcane cult trying to learn those powers. Lastly, we have the secrets and mysteries. So these are really kind of the deeper elements of your campaign, things that really come up in exploration. So your players, as they dive into different dungeons or locations, they're going to start to learn more about the setting, and you should have some mysteries or secrets for them to solve because that lets them feel clever. It lets them feel connected to the world as they want to learn more about it and really sort of drives their actions forward. There's no right or wrong on how many secrets or mysteries you should include, just whichever ones you think make sense and fit with the themes and the tone and the kind of vibe that you're going for within your campaign. Here I have 5 main secrets and mysteries listed out. So for example, the beings of great power, these primals once roamed the land, but sort of have retreated from the plane to their own kind of devisement. So why did they leave? Of course, the geomancers are very important to the setting that I've been building. They are the last kingdom, kind of the rulers. They had sort of this divine and arcane power. What was that power? How can the players learn about that power? What were the legacies they left behind? Things like that. What happened to Saint Gerald? So really this sort of mythic and important figure in the War of the Phoenix that led this rebellion against the geomancers. He disappeared. Why? Where did he go? And of course, why is the leader of the rebels proclaimed to be Saint Gerald Reborn? Something for the players to find if they interact with that faction. So that is it. That is my campaign outline. It's a pretty simple document. You're just outlining the different elements that I talked about, give them some thought, make some bullet points. As you start to build out your sandbox in detail, I come back and reference my outline all the time. And as I sort of think about things more, I'll go off and I'll make either subsections or new documents to detail them further. So maybe I'm thinking about a faction, I'll add more to that faction document. But I really come back to this and use this as kind of my north and guiding star as I'm sort of making choices within my sandbox. So if you found this useful, if you like these example or walkthrough type examples of how I prep games, please give it a like. Consider subscribing. I talk a lot about sandbox games and preparing for games. So if you want to see more content like that in the future, thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you again soon.